is, what is being done to save the John Hope Settlement House?
There are a lot of things at this particular time that is being worked on, both internally and with the parents and friends of John Hope, that are in works. And we are planning a town hall meeting so that we can get out all the information about what has occurred from the time that I was involved through Peter Lee.
Peter Lee being whom? I'm sorry, I'm not...
Peter Lee was the last executive director of John Hope.
Okay. And the other was, because there was like a lot of families that I'm also here to represent that had no knowledge. So we're aware of the fact that there is a hearing coming up for April, but in the event, these parents do not want to be caught at the last minute of trying to, like, we're all scattering, and I happen to be a grandparent. My children have gone to this establishment. Now my grandchildren are going there, and then to come in the door and be hit in the face with something like that, like, what do we do moving forward so that we're more informative of what's going on instead of having to go to the newspaper and having to pick it up that day or read it? Like, can you send out letters repetitiously, you know, so that we are aware of what's going on?
Absolutely can keep you informed, but please note that the current administration, being the board and staff, have also been hit by DCYF at the last 11th and three-quarter hour. They do not operate on a logical schedule. And that being said, is when it's presented to us, is when we present it to the staff and parents. So it's an ill practice of DCYF, known practice for years, that they are reactive instead of proactive. And that is one of the things that hopefully now with this new executive director of DCYF will change, because we have to keep in mind that these parents are definitely in need of the services, so they cannot scurry and just address the situation right as it's placed in their hands. So we've been cognizant of the parents and the hardship that would bring. It's DCYF.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Scorpio. Rep Lombardi, I went to the Flynn Model School many years ago. I want to go back to John Hope. My question is for Representative Williams. In 2014, John Hope lost a grant for $110,000 because of shortcomings in 15 areas of a state audit. In 2015, John Hope was disqualified from a federal food grant because you couldn't prove you were spending the money on food. In 2015, you also lost $27,581 in grants for property improvements. This year, in 2016, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development canceled 2 grants for $137,581 and a $300,000 grant concerns about accounting. Most recently, DCYF pulled the daycare license and reinstated it. Now, you mentioned, Mr. Lee, that this has all happened under your watch. Why don't you step down? Because John Hope is not going to be sustainable just on daycare money. And because we lost all this grant money, the writing is on the wall. Why don't you step down so somebody else can get it? Because as long as you're part of John Hope, they're not getting a dime.
And your question?
Why don't you step down so John Hope can get back on the right track?
First and foremost, yes, I mentioned Peter Lee. The monies, the areas for which the amounts that you presented are not correct. And what was pulled back by both city and state are grants for which, under my leadership, put in and requested to maintain the doors open. All of the defaults that you mentioned was under Peter Lee and others under his leadership. We inherited just about everything you mentioned on that, and that's why I encourage you to come to the meeting that will be held so that you can hear, and everyone, I would invite each and every one of you here to this evening to attend the meeting so that you all can get the actual facts. What has been happening is an inheritance of bad management that had nothing to do with myself or the individuals that are currently on the board.
What year did you start?
I started in 2013 when the previous administration started advocating when the previous administration were left.
But in 16, you lost money about funny accounting. Peter Lee wasn't around in 16.
In 16,
Peter
what
Lee
monies
wasn't
were...
around in 15, and I will be at the other meeting, but let's face it, even if it's not your fault, everything points to you. John Hope is not going to get another dime. John Hope is going to end up closing because you can't pay your bills on daycare money alone. So all these poor parents that are believing you, just like you said, that it wasn't closing, and then you sent a letter it was closing. There's so many different stories.
And that's just it. There's so many different stories, so I encourage you
these numbers are wrong, but these numbers are from the Journal and from Go Local, so they're wrong also?
Yes, because we have the factual amount that we are willing to present to you and everyone who will come to the meeting and hear about them.
Okay, we'll see.
Period.
Thank you.
You're welcome.